In this video, we will be servicing the lubrication system in this 2012 Ford F150. Through the driver's side door, we can locate the hood release latch and pop the hood. And releasing our secondary hood latch, we can gain access to the engine bay. Taking a look inside the engine bay, we want to focus on the driver's side portion, and specifically we are wanting to identify the oil fill location as well as the oil dipstick. The oil fill location has a cap that says SAE 5W30, and the oil dipstick can be identified by a yellow ring. We then want to shift our attention underneath the front of the vehicle. Taking a look underneath the vehicle towards the rear of the vehicle, we can see that there is a large metal plate that covers most of the underside of the engine bay. Directly behind that large metal plate is where we want to locate the oil drain plug. Taking a look from the other side, we can clearly see our transmission pan. Directly in front of that, we have our oil pan, and on that oil pan, we have our oil drain plug. Looking again towards the rear of the vehicle from underneath, we next want to locate the fiber shroud that is up towards the front of the vehicle. And this shroud is held on by several screw type and push type fasteners. If we unscrew those fasteners just a little bit, that will release that fiber shroud in that location. And with that shroud pulled back, we can see a white canister. That white canister is our oil filter. Now it is worth noting that there is a funnel that is built into the components on this vehicle that when you remove the oil filter, the oil should flow through that funnel and drain off the front end of the engine. And you need to know this for where to locate the drip pan. However, it is worth noting that the vehicle is leaning towards the back because I'm using rhino ramps. So there's a good possibility that my oil will flow towards the back. Just something to keep in mind when we do go to remove that oil filter. Now it is worth noting that you can partially see that oil filter from the top of the engine, and you could theoretically access that through the top of the engine. However, from underneath, it is just a little bit easier. To set up for this service, I have installed rhino ramps under the front tires. I have installed wheel chocks underneath the rear tires. I have set the parking brake, and I've installed safety stands just in case the rhino ramps fail. Because we are switching this engine over to Amsoil and we don't know what oil has been previously ran in it for the last 141,000 miles, we will be installing Amsoil's engine and transmission flush. This will ensure that the sludge and buildup within the engine gets cleaned out prior to installing Amsoil. And after installing Amsoil's engine and transmission flush in the engine, we're going to start and idle the vehicle for 10 to 15 minutes. During this idle time, we're going to prep everything else by setting up the drain pan and getting the right wrenches for the drain plug. And after we have idled the engine for 10 to 15 minutes, we want to immediately remove the drain plug and allow all of the hot oil to drain out. This plug was installed too tight by the previous mechanic. So using a rubber mallet, I can give it a little bit of gentle persuasion to help loosen it. Now it is worth noting that the trajectory of the oil is such that we hit on our suspension components and the oil kind of goes everywhere. And we're going to continue to let that drain until we get as much oil out as we possibly can. We can then shift our attention to removing the oil filter. You want to make sure you have a drip pan underneath wherever you think the oil is going to end up. Now, if installed correctly, we should be able to remove this by hand without the need of any special tools. And you always want to consider that the oil might be hot. And inside the engine on the oil filter adapter plate, we do want to make sure that the rubber ring from the oil filter has come off. We will also be checking the oil filter just to verify. Prior to putting everything back together, I like to do a couple checks. One, I want to check and make sure that the new filter looks like it is about the same as the old filter. This vehicle takes an EAO 17 Amsoil oil filter. Additionally, I like to make sure that the rubber ring came off of the engine from the old oil filter and that it is not stuck up inside the engine. And additionally, I like to take some new oil and coat the rubber ring of our new oil filter. This will ensure that we have a nice tight seal on that mating surface in the engine. And inside of the engine, I like to make sure that the mating surface has been cleaned off and that there is no buildup of old oil or sludge or anything of that nature. We can then spin on our new filter, and we want this to be hand tight. You don't want to over tighten this or use any type of a tool, because you run the risk of blowing out that rubber ring and then you lose your seal. Now that the vast majority of our oil has drained out, we can reinstall the oil plug, and this will be tightened to 20 foot-pounds with a 15mm socket. Back up top of the engine, we will be installing 6 quarts of Amsoil Signature Series 5W30 motor oil. And after those 6 quarts have been installed, we can remove our funnel and replace that cap. To wrap up this service, we can reinstall that lower shroud. After filling the oil, I like to run the engine for about 15 seconds just to get the oil flowing inside of the engine. I can then remove all of my Rhino ramps, safety stands, wheel chocks, parking brake. I then want to check the dipstick to verify that I am in the acceptable range. Now, after having ran this for about 15 seconds and checking the dipstick, I am at the lowest point for my acceptable range. My preference is to be in the middle to upper portion of that range. The distance between the lowest dot and the highest dot is typically about 1 quart. So I will go ahead and install an extra half a quart, recheck it, see if I'm liking where that's at, and if everything looks good, this service is complete.